So I'm Dan Lynch, CEO of Interweb Inc., the company behind Cosmology, and here to talk about Starship. Before I do that, I want to thank Sunny, Dave, and the Osmosis team for inviting me here. Remember when it was just an idea? So excited to see it actualized, and really appreciate you guys letting me be a part of it. So the talk, I actually renamed it. It's Starship, Engineering Developer Productivity and Happiness. So Starship is actually about the joy of programming. So I come from sort of the no-code, low-code world. I've been building in the web for nearly 3 decades. For the past 15 years, I've been building startups in the Valley, starting with drag and drop application builders. One was called Famous a long time ago, famo.us. Maybe some of you are old enough to remember that one. Brandcast.com, which got acquired by Time Magazine. After that, I built a dynamic database builder, parser and transpiler, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, which actually was the inspiration for Telescope and Cosmology. And now we're getting into fusing all these together, the interweb, I'll talk briefly about. But essentially, some of you might not know this, but Cosmology is a part of Interweb, which is the parent company. And we also have the LaunchQL brand. So we're powering both Web 2 and Web 3. We've got over 1 million databases that are powered with our parsers, our transpilers. Every Supabase database, every Neon database is using a very similar tool that was the inspiration for Telescope that I wrote about 4 years ago. And we have about 10 million, whoa, sorry, it's a big number, 10 million downloads. And that was the inspiration for Cosmology. So we built Telescope and a bunch of other tools. We are now powering about 150 Cosmos SDK chains, large multi-billion market cap giants like Osmosis, Celestia, DYDX, among others. We're now the official tooling in the Cosmos for front end. So with about 9.5 million downloads across our software. So about 20 million downloads across all of our suite, which we like to consider like the Adobe for Web3. All that means is that you can use them interdependently by themselves. They also work cohesively for bigger or more complex projects. Essentially, we bring the interoperability of the Cosmos SDK to the client. And I know we're talking about Starship today, but there's a reason for this, which is that, you know, Starship, like as was just mentioned in the previous talk, there's a lot of different testing platforms out there. So I think it's important to talk a little bit about why what section we're focused on and why, and particularly the different scenarios. So for Starship, the reason you're going to want to use Starship is primarily if you're building user interfaces and front end and clients. That is the #1 reason that we built Starship. DevNets, testnets, chain upgrades. If you want to deal with chain upgrades, it's a very risky, complex situation. Very simple to set up a chain upgrade and test it in Starship. Also, circular dependencies. If you're using Cosmos SDK, you want to test a different version of Tendermint. You want to have 2 different Cosmos chains and test both of them with different versions of, you know, Go, Cosmos SDK, whatever it might be. You don't have those types of conflicts that you do with some of these other testing frameworks. But specifically, I want to focus on the user interface, UI, UX. There was a recent study that came out, S16 Research Ventures, very recently. They discovered in the Cosmos, users actually care the most about UI, UX. That's more than performance, airdrops, tokenomics, yields, and even security. So for us, it was validation that we've actually been focused on something that's very aligned with the users. And that excites us to keep building and doing that what we've always been doing, which is focusing on user experience, the client, and user interfaces. So the next time you sit down for a new project, I want you to ask yourself, is the first thing you're doing writing a test? And for many of you, it's probably no. And I already asked a couple people today and got that answer. And it's probably because it's too hard. With Starship, we see it the other way around, where we want it to be as easy as writing your first line of code. Writing a test should be as easy as that. For us, it's not optional, it's integral, and we're going to talk a little bit about this. So imagine you're a soccer player. Would you want to be the one that can see the goal, take a shot, and score, or the one wandering in the dark? And I have to admit, I was this guy in the dark when I first joined the Cosmos in January 2022, and I tried to make my first swap transaction with Cosm.js on Osmosis. There was no documentation. I had no idea what an encoding was, and quite frankly, there was no way to test anything because everything was in production. So I actually almost gave up and didn't end up building, so it's possible that we wouldn't have Telescope or Cosmology. Somehow I burned the candle at both ends, bit the bullet, and decided to build a light bulb and turn the light on and share it with everybody else. So the whole point is you want to see the goal so you can shoot and try and score. Otherwise, you're in the dark. And I know it's a technical conference, but I think, especially after going to the ICF meeting and just talking with the team of teams, I think we philosophically need to think more about testing across the Cosmos as a whole. So I'm going to get into some technical stuff, but I really, really want to try to use some metaphors, talk about why it's important, because I think it's really, really important to do this, because the most important thing is to get from your ideas to the actual execution of your idea. The concept in your mind that you want to build, how do you quickly get to that? Well, usually there's some gap between your idea and the execution. Cosmology's sole purpose, our sole mission, is to close this gap of execution, right? And one of my favorite computer scientists, Brett Victor, he did this seminal talk 2012 called Inventing on Principle. I encourage all of you to check this out. Basically, the idea was that he wanted it so that you could write a piece of code. When you hit save, you're going to see the result instantly. So you get this instantaneous feedback. You get this tangible result. And so effectively, you get this sort of loop that helps you to build software more quickly. And it actually compounds. And that's what helps you minimize this gap between your ideas and the execution of your ideas. One way I like to think about it is imagine you have two developers side by side. This is just a hypothetical case. One writes code for 2 seconds, and they get a result back in 200 milliseconds. The next developer writes code for 2 seconds and has to, for 2 minutes, click on a browser or something, right? So we're talking about engineering developer productivity here. How do we do that? Well, we have to think about this developer experience, like the challenge of it. If you have a bad developer experience, the second developer who's now waiting for 2 minutes, every single time he's writing code for 2 seconds, well, he might have to go, hit save, he goes to the browser, refresh, click interact. Again, we're kind of talking about front end here for the most part. Over the period of 10 years, the second developer is really just a junior quality assurance, and not even engineer, just quality assurance tester, right? So if you're are you spending most of your life testing your code manually, or are you actually writing software? So my argument is that your test should be your code, and you should have the smallest feedback loops possible between the moment you're hitting save on your keyboard, so you can minimize these steps that are basically causing developer fatigue, to slow time to market, carpal tunnel, let's not really argue with that one, increase bugs, decrease code quality. The biggest problem is unhappy developers. I've seen it time and time again, especially at bigger companies. You'll see developers that are burnt out, and a lot of times it's just because they get onto these big legacy code bases that are not joyful to work with. So if you get rid of this, thinking about Starship, we make it so that you hit save, you see the result, you get back to writing code. So basically, we minimize that loop so you can get between your idea and execution. You can spend most of your time writing code. And I know I'm talking about Starship here, but this could be anything. This could even be just doing a Node.js test for some other library. This is actually a generic concept that I think we should all think about, just testing in general and why we should do it. I have to admit, I didn't always think this way when I was in my 20s, even some of my 30s. I was like, isn't it a tautology? If I write it, it's true. Why would I test that it's true? But then once we started working with clients like General Electric and Visa, we had to do these giant security audits with stacks of papers this big. And when we made a change to our code and we affected 10,000 websites, well, then it really mattered. And I felt the burn. So I've been there for some of you that don't understand why tests are important. It sounds like a boring topic, but I will tell you this. Once you get into it, it's like you're never going to go back, because it does bring back the joy of programming. It brings back the craft, the artistic craft of software. And also this dopamine loop, right? So if you're writing code this way, you're getting more productive and you're happy, right? Don't you want to be like these people? I mean, look at them. I'm sure we've all had experiences like this. I know I've been there in the Osmosis office and see some people excited before. This is what developer productivity and happiness looks like. So to Starship now, we're going to get a little bit more technical. Starship will simulate an entire life cycle for blockchain networks, and we're talking full validators, IBC relayers, chain registry, Explorer. Someone was asking questions earlier about this. So you can support any kind of software. It's totally pluggable. You could add databases. You can add caches. This thing is actually built on Kubernetes, so all the orchestration is kind of managed by Google. It's easy as 1, 2, 3. Number 1, just set up some YAML files. 2, run Starship start. 3, run your tests. So all of the installation, you install Starship JS and our CLI, add it to your package JSON, just config, and then look, multi-chain configurations here. Number of validators, your RPC endpoints. And also you can have any version of Go, any version of the Cosmos SDK, any number of chains. And then you just run Starship start. This is basically like igniting the engines of your blockchain rocket going to the moon. And then you run your tests. The other thing you can do, because it wouldn't actually match Victor's vision of minimizing the distance between the idea and your execution, unless you can watch your code, right? Because you need to save the code and then it runs a test. That way all you're doing is writing code all day. You're just hitting against your test. You know if it passed or failed. If you break someone else's code, you're also going to know. So again, as many changes as you want, as many validators as you want. Docker images, you want to do something custom, we can support that. Chain upgrades, put in your Genesis, put in the array of your upgrades. You can do tests and simulate things that are very complicated. IBC relayers, I'm just going a little fast because I got a few minutes here. But we also have a local host chain registry, so it's the same syntax that you'd all expect. We also have a local host explorer, thank you PingPub, and isomorphic code between client and test. This means your telescope-based code, will all literally run in the test. You can literally copy-paste it directly into a dApp. So this is the whole point, is that you shouldn't be spending your time, for the front-end developers here, in browsers. You should be writing all the business logic inside of code. Once it works, then you just do presentation components in the UI and just hook up the data, right? Cosmos kit syntax, right? So easy integration with the chain registry. So all the code just is the same as it is. If you need mnemonics, we've got a way to generate mnemonics, get new signers, and obviously you want to work with build real-world operations without necessarily touching real-world assets. So every single chain that gets launched launches with a faucet by default. So in your test, you can just spin up accounts, get funding, boom. You're not dealing with a real test net where you might have some limitations there, right? So people that were telling me that oh, what about test nets? Well, test nets are production as far as I'm concerned. Starship runs on GitHub. And this is actually directly from the Osmo.js, which is running right now. And so you can see here, we get tokens, we create pools, we can query pools, join pools, lock tokens, and swap tokens in a pool. And so this stuff used to take me 30 minutes to test by myself before I had Starship, which is the impetus for writing this. And now it just runs in a minute on GitHub Actions, spinning up a whole cluster. Not going to have time for a demo today, but find me and we can do that one. This is used by a lot of great teams. Agoric, Cosmos SDK uses it, Osmosis. We're using it on Osmo.js, Injective, Skip for something. Polymer had made some pull requests. Neutron's using it as well. But I want to give credit to the inventor, Anmol, who's not here right now. Look at his handsome face. I love this guy. Woo! So that's Starship. Starship is not just software. It's a philosophy. It's about the joy of programming and bringing back the craft and that excitement about coding again. And it doesn't even have to be Starship technically. Just write tests, please. We don't want any more security issues or exploits and all this stuff. If you're starting a new blockchain, the first thing you should do is write a test first, okay? Please and thank you. And just a little bit about Cosmology. We're sort of like this, assembly line for building applications, like a factory for apps. You might be using our software. We do a lot of public goods. Like I mentioned, we got about 20 million downloads. All of our software is MIT, BSD, or Apache. So check out if you can either make pull requests, contribute to our code. We also have an Osmosis and a Stargaze validator if you want to delegate to support us. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Can you give the latest alpha on Interchain dApps?
Yep. So there were some slides that were actually not in this one. So the ICF funded us to build Cosmos.js 2.0. And after some deliberation, we're actually deciding to call it Interchain dApps. We decided that looking at the code base from Cosmos.js, it was built at a 0 to 1 time for Cosmos. And there's just a lot of new requirements. And if you look at something like Cosmos Kit, we have one interface, but we have like 20 plus wallets that we support. It's like an adapter pattern, right? Where you can just plug in a new wallet and it just works. So we decided to take that same approach to build the new version of Cosmos.js, Interchain dApps. And we're actually going to be kicking it off probably in the next couple weeks here. It's already actually running in GitHub Actions with Starship, with all those tests you saw in Osmo.js currently working. And we can already sign Ethereum. We can sign Cosmos transactions. We'll be able to sign, by the time we launch, Injective and Dimension. And the reason that we wanted to pick these is because we wanted to have enough different versatile variations and scenarios so that we can have different auth modules, different account modules, different encoders, and make sure that it was robust enough to support all these in a simplified way, just like Cosmos Kit. So if a new network comes out in the future and they have some encoding X, Y, or Z, literally you just build an adapter and it works. We have been doing dev previews with a few teams like Squid Router. If you guys are interested in banging on it, let me know. It's already published on NPM. We are doing a bit of a refactor, which we're nearly complete with. So stay tuned. There will be also a Cosmos Kit 3 because our thought was we could refactor Cosmos Kit to make it work with Interchain dApps because it's going to be so much more flexible. But the two biggest things that we're focused on, because we have 12 engineers, we're primarily focused on Cosmos Kit Interchain dApps. So we have a lot of manpower on this right now. Is going to be bundle size and extensibility. So get ready, but basically everything from chain registry, Cosmos Kit, Interchain dApps, expect like the Web 2 level tree shaking and bundle sizes and developer experience with full end-to-end testing, integration tests, and unit tests. And it's really exciting. Yeah, thank you for that question.